One of the books that I read this month was Bill Bryson's book about Shakespeare's life. It's a very short, kind of concise biography of William Shakespeare. And I thought it was very interesting. For one thing, Bryson uses his usual droll and funny, humorous writing style to talk about what we don't know about Shakespeare, how much of what is written about him is unknown and therefore probably made up a lot of the time, and nothing known about his family life. It's a blank slate. And how many words? I think 12,000 words were added to the English language during the time of Shakespeare's writing, which I thought was really interesting. And all in all, I feel like I learned quite a bit about the time period, about the scholarship of Shakespeare, and how many thousands of books have been written about him and his plays, and so much conjecture and so much out and out basically making things up to fit a narrative or to fit a theory. And I thought it was really interesting. I just finished reading A.S. Byatt's The Children's Book, and I've had this on my Kindle for probably years, and it must have been a Kindle deal that I picked up a long time ago and had been meaning to read the book for a long time. And I'd started it a couple of times, and it just seemed very like it was going to be a children's fantasy in some way, just the way it started. So I asked on Twitter some people, I said, or just to my Twitter feed, I just said, should I read this book? And several BookTube friends, including Hannah from Hannah's Books, said I should read it. And Hannah was specifically and very enthusiastic about that it would be a great time to read such a book that I could get so immersed in, and that she wished she were reading it again. So I did read it. It took me almost the whole month. I loved it. I thought it was so full. I mean, it was way overstuffed with characters, with different plot threads, with long descriptions of puppet shows, children's literature, even passages and stories from the books that the main character Olive had written, how to glaze a pot, techniques, all kinds of things that were just woven into the story. And there were so many characters, and I really think Byatt did a fantastic job of creating this entire world. It was almost like Middlemarch, because it's centered on several families in a very socialist community. And so there's a lot of politics involved, and there are people coming from the outside to influence the group with different ideas. And so you just learn a lot about from 1895 until 1919. So, and there are a lot of children that we're following from like adolescence all the way through to young adulthood. So there was a lot going on. I was never bored. I just was kind of enjoying, reveling in this really very enhanced plot. And another bonus is that I was watching this pottery reality show that was kind of based on the Great British Baking Show, but it's about pottery, and it was on, I think it's on Disney Plus, or HBO Max. I don't know. There's so many streaming services. I will let you know. But so we were watching all of this pottery competition during the time I was reading this book, where there would be long chapters about pottery techniques and glazes and firings and what would happen sometimes if you fire something wrong in a kiln. And sure enough, it was happening right on the reality show. So worlds were colliding as I was reading the book, and I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it if you're in the mood for that kind of a story. I think you have to be a little bit patient, but it was really rewarding. I read a book by James Wood, and it's called How Fiction Works, and it's his theory about how he's a book critic and a studier of literature, and also a novelist. And he was talking about, with lots and lots of concrete examples, how fiction works in our brain and on us, in terms of character, in terms of style, what else? All the different aspects of language and thought that bring a story together, whether it works or not, and if it's written at a level that's too high for its characters, and what happens when everything just goes right, and how Flaubert was the like progenitor of the realist style that we love. And then there's even a whole section near the end about what happens when you break the forms that we expect in fiction due to the circumstances of our culture and as in reaction to the culture, and why writers like Rachel Cusk and Ben Lerner and all the writers that I've seen people think of as pretentious, or no, they're just trying something different, and it may or may not work all the time, but it's fascinating to actually see a conventional format get kind of exploded and changed and subverted. And I don't always like to read that type of literature. I'm pretty happy in a world of realistic fiction, but it's also kind of gratifying to also break out of that sometimes. So I read the James Wood book right before I read the A.S. Byatt novel, and I really do think that his theories about, particularly about narrative and indirect free and direct style, and how the narrator is easily, the consciousness of the narration is easily skipping from character to character. And I really think that Byatt does a great job of using that theory to create all these different characters. So reading the book by James Wood really did influence my reading of A.S. Byatt, and that was kind of a fun exercise at this time in my life right now. I also did finish the Jill Lepore book about Benjamin Franklin's sister Jane, and that was really informative. Particularly fascinating what were the descriptions about the plague at the time, and all of the different diseases that were happening, and how many people died very young in that period of history. So Jane Franklin's, all of her children, her grandchildren, her siblings, her parents, all died before she did. And so she was kind of left alone, even though she'd had so many children, and they all died young of typhus, what they didn't know and didn't call typhus then, but they think is typhus. And so how precarious the democracy was, and the war, and her inability to express herself the way that Franklin was allowed to. Benjamin Franklin, was a man, and he had a lot more freedom than she did, and he was educated and she wasn't, and she didn't have the opportunities, yet she did have the desire, and so she wrote lots of correspondence to him, and she kept her own library of books, and she did read, and she did care about thoughts, ideas, concepts, philosophy, but she wasn't able to express it in the same way that he was. And so for that reason, I really did like the book. I'm just about done reading the Edna O'Brien collected works with Sean, and we only have 2 very short little pieces left, and then we're done. So that's taken several months, and it's been really rewarding. I've figured out what I like about her writing and what I actually don't like about her writing, or about some of the stories that she tells. So I think we'll talk more about that later, but it was really gratifying to read that with Sean and kind of bounce ideas off of each other every single week for, months and months. So that's been great. I always promised myself that I was not going to download TikTok, but then when Donald Trump made it clear that we had to download it by last weekend, or we wouldn't have access to it possibly, I had to download it, and now I watch it all the time, and it's influencing the way I clean, and it's ridiculous, but I've been spending a lot of time organizing and cleaning my shower doors and cabinets, and so I think it's a reaction to stress. I don't know what's going on with me, but that's what I'm spending a lot of my time doing. Also, still watching The Wire with the family, and watching the pottery show, as I mentioned before. And Chris and I are also doing a rewatch of St. Elsewhere. We were big St. Elsewhere fans when we were dating and early married. And in fact, I think it ended in 1988. We'd been married for a couple of years, so we watched St. Elsewhere together. So we're rewatching that. A lot of it is pretty bad, very dated, racist and sexist, and really insensitive, but there's still a heart to it that comes out in some of the episodes, and it does remind me of a different time. So that is something we've been spending a lot of time doing. We only have 1.5 seasons left, and we'll be done with that. And rewatching, just like rereading, can really shed light on the way that we watched TV in the past and the way that we watch it now. So really, that's all I have to say about my wrap-up. Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing and being good friends when we all need good friends. And I will see you in the next video. Bye. I forgot to say that it's my BookTube anniversary, so I've been having this channel for 2 years, and it's been great. So, yay.